Hi, I'm Mike Morse. Welcome to another episode of Open Mic. Today we are talking to George Hunter from the Detroit News, a longtime criminal beat reporter over 20 years who's covering all kinds of things in Detroit, especially talking to exonerees and talking about the problems in our criminal justice system, among many, many other stories. And I wanted to interview George for a long time because I'm a big fan of Sins of Detroit, a 5-series podcast that he put out last year that I think is really, really good, worth a listen. You should do so if you haven't already. But we'll talk to George about all things Detroit and crime. So let's welcome George Hunter to the show.
Joining us this morning is Mike Morse, Detroit's top attorney. Mike Morse is in here to tell us about the backpack giveaway.
Adapt and change things up a little bit every year.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. I've been reading your stuff for years. I'm listening to your podcasts. I think you do a great job. But before we dive in, tell me where you're from, what brought you to Detroit, and anything else you want us to know before we dive in.
Well, I was born and raised in Detroit. I grew up in the Cass Corridor, which was the red light district of the city. In the 70s, when it was the Cass Corridor, they changed it to Midtown now. But back then it was a very interesting neighborhood to grow up in, very diverse. You hear about the hookers and the crime. But some of my, and I had friends of mine whose parents were hookers, dope dealers, etc., dope addicts. And I also had friends whose parents were doctors and medical people from the DMC. They all lived in the neighborhood. It was really interesting, and I think it helped me a great deal in the crime beat. Because first of all, you're living in a high crime area. You get, personal experience growing up of not only what families go through when they're victims of crimes. My family has been the victim of crimes, but also the criminal side. I've got criminals in my family, and 3 of my siblings were Detroit cops.
Are those no, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to make that joke.
So, I have both sides of it. You grow up seeing both sides of the spectrum. You grow up seeing what policing looks like in a poor community from one of the poor people, that sort of thing. And it's an education I wouldn't have traded for anything.
How did you not become a cop if your family's all cops?
I guess you could equally ask the question, how did I not become a criminal when
Okay. All right, that's the next question. Don't rush me.
We throw it in the ocean and see where the tide takes us, I guess.
So why journalism? What brought you there?
Well, as a kid, I lived near Cass, and not far from the public library there, the main branch, and I would walk down there, and I'm a Tiger fan, so I would go through the old microfilms, and I would look up Ty Cobb, Hank Greenberg, those days. I was just fascinated. My grandma used to tell me about it, and so it fascinated me for some reason. So it wasn't anything highbrow, I promise you. I was going down there to read about the old Tigers. I was 10, 11, 12 years old doing this. And I just sort of fell in love with newspapers and the notion that you're a historian. I love history. The idea that maybe 100 years from now, somebody will read one of my stories. And I think I feel a really strong responsibility about that I tell people what happened and take my biases out of it, what Emerson called a transparent eyeball. I want to tell you, I'd come to journalism from a history. I want to make a record of what happened, and I covered Detroit crime. So my job is to make a record as comprehensively as I can and as unbiased as I can of what happened here in this time and place.
And you've been on the Detroit crime beat for how long? How many years?
Since 98.
And for the
so that's 22? 20.
For the news.
For the news. I've been at the news for 25, and I was in business at first, and then I went on the crime beat in 98. Then I was on the crime beat in Macomb County for a few years, and then the Western Hwy, but it's been pretty much crime that whole time. And I think I was on the Detroit police crime beat from 98 till around 2000 or so. Then I went out to the suburbs, covered the crime out there for a while, did the Tara Grant case, that stuff like that. Then I came back to Detroit police, I believe, in 2007 or 8, somewhere in there, and I've been on there since.
So before we talk about your podcast and exoneree stuff, it feels like there's so much going on right now with Detroit police, Detroit crime, federal agents threatening to come into Detroit and help the Detroit police, even though they're not asking for help. I'm reading in your paper and other papers and in news sources about crime rates and violent crime being up, and there's certain people saying we need the federal government to come in and help the Detroit police. What's your take on everything in the moment, what we're dealing with right now?
Well, specifically to feds, in Detroit, that's a sore spot with a lot of people. I grew up hearing the stories of tanks rolling down Cass Avenue in 1967. So I think when you say feds, I think people think that. I don't, and Schneider the U.S. Attorney Schneider, he just had a press conference moments ago about this. And from what I heard on the radio, I didn't cover it, but I had talked to some people beforehand of it looks like basically just a few more bodies of what they've already, there's nothing new about federal local task forces. And I point out that those don't always go smoothly. If you remember, you had the Terrence Kellum case with the ICE shooting. And a few months ago, I covered a series of stories about an informant for the DEA and the ATF. He went on to allegedly kill 6 people. And there was a big flap over whose informant he was.
I remember that.
These are federal local partnerships. They go back decades. There's nothing new. It's just, I think a lot of it's because Trump's doing it. That's like a red flag to a lot of people. I think a lot of it is just the idea here in Detroit. Feds, like I said, that invokes the vision of you have tanks rolling down Cass. But if you really unpack it and look at what it is, it's a few extra agents working on things that they're already working on with these federal task force. That's the way it's an expansion, he said, of the program they announced last year, just more agents to do it.
So I don't watch a lot of local TV. I think what I've been reading in the comments and questions that I've been getting and people in my circles, I think what's happening in Portland, people are scared of happening in other cities, especially Detroit. But my sense is those kind of protests are not happening in Detroit.
They're not.
And so I know that we're having some violent crime. We're having some, I talked to somebody running for city for a state rep seat today, and he was talking about how these are retaliatory hits, a lot of them, and they have nothing to do with the protests.
They don't.
So, they're trying. I think people are trying to make it, feel like that the Portland chaos is coming to Detroit. You don't feel that way. You're saying you think it's just some extra bodies.
No, I don't think at all. And in fact, Mayor Duggan and Chief Craig and Schneider today, according to what I heard on the radio, everybody, now they're saying it, of course, what they say is not necessarily, but they're stressing this has nothing to do with the protests. This has to do with crime in the area.
Okay.
Again, having said that still makes people nervous,
Sure.
some people, because Detroit is, but I don't see, again, I'd have to see how this is going to look when the rubber hits the road, but when I'm reading and what I can see, I just don't, it's extra bodies of programs that have been here for,
Is crime up in Detroit right now?
Significantly, yeah.
So do you know any statistics?
Yeah, homicides are up 31% from the same period last time, and shootings are up 50%,
That's a lot.
Significant, yeah. There's a lot of these are parties. I've been trying to kind of look at them and see if I can smell out any trends or anything like. I've seen a lot of parties, multiple shootings. There's more than that than I've ever seen.
Wow.
The chief says a lot of it has to do with COVID. You're seeing it in cities across. This isn't unique to Detroit. New York's homicide rate's up like 150%. The numbers are ridiculous.
But what is the chief saying? Why is COVID causing this?
You have a lot of people sitting at home, frustrated, nothing to do, and idle hands, devil's playground maybe, frustration maybe. Now, property crime is down because people are home. They're not breaking into homes because no one's going to work, so that's down. The car thefts, I believe, are significantly down, things of that nature. But then the violent crime is way up. So,
Okay. Well, that's not obviously good news.
No.
Do you think the city of Detroit could use some help, could get some extra bodies on the ground? I mean, is it your mindset that couldn't hurt?
Well, it depends on what they do. I mean, we had if you get a bunch of bodies on the ground, what's the physician's thing? Is the first thing, do no harm, but I mean, if they come and they help investigate crimes and that sort of thing, the ATF, I think, gave the biggest, because they're going for guns. That's the big push here, and that's another area that's always a sticky wicket is proactive policing. The idea that you want to get more guns off the street. I think most citizens want that, but it's how you go about it. It's the same as a stop and frisk or stop, question, and frisk, which is the more accurate description of it. If that's done properly, it's a good law enforcement tool. If not done properly, it becomes a profiling situation. So you know what I mean? If you have, the Terry law, the Terry stop, if you have probable cause to stop somebody with a legitimate cause, and you do stop them, and you see you smell weed, so that enables you to search, and you get 3 guns that are illegal, and these guys are wanted felons, that I don't think any law-respecting person would say they don't like that. But the question is, when you start cutting corners, and you got human people and that sort of thing, so gets into all those existential issues.
You bring up Terry stops, bringing me back to my law school days.
Well, I mean, it's like a gun.
Yeah.
I mean, if a cop uses a gun properly, that's a good law enforcement tool. If he abuses that tool, it can be deadly. I think that you can extrapolate that into almost every law enforcement tactic or piece of equipment.
So you've been doing this over 20 plus years in Detroit. Chief Craig's been around since 2013. Generally, I hear only high praise for him, and that he is turning a once corrupt, use any adjectives you want, department. What's your take on Chief Craig?
Well, I'm still covering him, so I don't want, what I mean? I try to stay away from personal opinions.
Okay.
I can tell you what I hear from people is that your assessment is what I'm hearing from most people. There are critics who say the biggest criticism of him is that he loves the camera too much. Now I've asked him about that, and he's told me many times he feels like it's his job to be on TV and he said, if I don't advocate for the DPD, who's going to?
It's interesting. That's a really good point, George. When I met him for the first time over a year ago, he joked with me that I'm taking up too much camera time for him. I find him very personable, and I find his communication skills remarkable. The police shooting that happened a couple weeks ago on the front lawn, and I'm blanking on the kid's name.
Hakeem Littleton.
Thank you. When Mr. Littleton was shot, there was a panic that there was going to be rioting and protesting, and he released body cam footage to show it was a clean shoot in most people's eyes, quickly. Like, I couldn't believe how quickly he moved.
They generally don't do that.
No, I know. Can you fill out that point? That's my point exactly. Within, it felt like an hour, he had body cam footage on TV, on the internet, so people would not riot, and I thought it quelled the situation beautifully, but I'd like your take.
I was out there at the, if you want to call it a riot, the unrest, whatever you call it, it was getting ugly.
Was it?
It was getting really ugly, yeah. People were throwing things at the cops, and, it was getting, then you had them in riot gear. They were sort of advancing. Then they did a strategic retreat to kind of, it was interesting to watch, I've been on this beat a long time, and it gets pretty scary out there sometimes. People are screaming. You got people like, with these like anger, and you're looking around, and you gotta, it can be a little unnerving. I was there the first one where there was a shoot. A guy got killed like within 50 yards of where I was. I recorded a murder on my Facebook Live. I recorded it. I thought it was, I felt like a dummy. I'm like, that sounds like firecrackers, because when there's buildings, you can't tell because the report kind of echoes of a gunfire, and it's hard to tell. I said, it sounds kind of like firecrackers. I was right down the street. A guy got killed. So yeah, it's crazy.
Wow. You had the sound of the killing on your Facebook Live, not the actual visual.
No, not the visual. No, I had the sound of it, and I was like, "Oh, what is this?" Okay, and then it was all live. It was
Which
crazy.
shooting was that?
Ooh, that was a guy from East Point. They said that it didn't have anything to do with the protest. It was a matter, one of those things where the guy looks at a guy the wrong way, and blah blah. There's so many of those.
That's scary.
Yeah.
So, what got you interested in wrongful convictions? Because that's definitely a focus of your podcast, Sins of Detroit. I know that you have a passion for that, as do I. Tell me what got you into it.
Well, I mean, you just hear these stories. Yeah, as you're going about the crime beat, these come across your desk. There'll be a wrongful conviction once in a while. And I have to be very careful not to be an advocate. Mm-hmm. Although, I mean, there are certain things I'm supposed to be, down the middle and as a journalist, but come on, we can stipulate some things. Murder is bad. I don't think I'm editorializing too much by taking that stand, right? And convicting somebody who didn't commit the crime is bad. I don't think I'm sacrificing my journalistic objectivity by saying that. So it's just, I don't know, you just see these things and you talk to these guys and it just breaks your heart. One of the things I could say up front is that's remarkable is I get bitter when, I lose out on 30 cents or something. If the guy gives me, I can't fathom how somebody can do 20 years. They didn't do the crime. And they get out and they're not bitter as hell about it. And they just don't hate the world.
Mm-hmm.
I think what it is when you get pushed to a certain, and I'm just guessing here because I've not been in that situation, but this is what they've told me. It's they make the choice that either I'm going to let this eat me alive and it's just going to destroy me as a person, or I have to not do that. So they're forced into a situation, I think, where, and there have been a few of them, sadly, who have kind of got self-consumed by that, and they haven't done well upon getting out. Most of them are not in that category. Most of them seem to be adjusting okay, and that, but it's remarkable to me.
I agree with you. Now that I've met at least two gentlemen who I've actually become friends with, and the fact that there is no bitterness, the fact that they want to help people, the fact that they don't have a lot of outward anger, and then when you hear their stories, all you want to do is cry. All you want to do is scream. You want to fix the problem.
Yeah.
I sense that in your podcast. I sense that in your writing, and I'm with you. And I don't think anybody with a heart who could hear these stories and not feel. So, you've covered all of them. And is there one that sticks out in your mind that's worse than the rest? They're all bad.
Yeah.
They're all the worst.
Yeah.
But is there one that has more to it, or more twists and turns, or more corruption than any other case that stands out to you?
The Davontae Sanford. In a lot of that, it was the age when he was arrested at age 14. There are some, but that one just has everything in it. It has just unbelievable alleged corruption. I have to be careful because no one's been convicted in a court of law here. So you know what I mean?
Right.
But just tons of allegations of these sort of things, of just cynical, knowing that you're doing wrong and burying the truth simply because, according to the folks I talked to, they just don't want to be embarrassed. That to me, that blows my mind that you could sleep at night. So
I've dove into several cases, Devontae being one of them. You did an excellent job in your two-part series, your 2-episode series of Devontae Sanford's case on Sins of Detroit, which is on all the podcast channels. For the viewers and listeners who don't know who he is, can you give us a quick-ish rendition as to what happened, and then we'll talk about some of the crazy facts?
Sure. He was a 14-year-old kid. He was blind in one eye. He used to get teased as a kid, and someone threw an egg at him, and the eggshell cut his eye. He was blind in his eye. Had a developmental disability, so he was kind of teased and things like that as a kid, small kid. Lived on the east side of Detroit. So in September one night of 2007, there was a quadruple homicide in a drug house on Runyon Street, which was basically down in the next block from where Devontae lived. A lot of strange things going on here, coincidences. It so happened that at the time of the killing, Devontae was at the home of his aunt, who was dating Bill Rice, who was the head of homicide and has since been convicted of his own, he was doing some financial stuff and drugs. And, so interestingly enough, he was at her house when the murder happened. According to Devontae, he was walking out there to see what was going on, just being nosy, saw the TV trucks, and a cop approached him and asked him, did he know anything? And he says, no. They started talking. And somehow he gets picked up. This part's stipulated by everybody. Michael Russell, who recently just resigned from DPD, by the way, the homicide detective, and a commander at the time, James Tolbert, took this kid in the car and drove him around for 3 hours. This is stipulated by everybody. To me, that's incredibly, if you know anything about how this works, somebody that high up to spend 3 hours. A commander might come to a crime scene to deal with the media or maybe to be the quarterback for but that's pretty high up. Even a captain or a lieutenant, generally speaking, isn't going to get their nails dirty like that. That would be the equivalent of saying the president of the company spent 3 hours cleaning out the bathroom. It's like that doesn't usually happen, okay? A commander doesn't usually drive around with a suspect, a 14-year-old, for 3 hours in a car, but that's what everybody stipulates happened. So I'm getting too much into the weeds here. The upshot is he claims that he was tricked by the police into saying, just say you did it. Give me something to get my boss off my back. I just need, and so, they were letting him play on the computer. They built his trust. This is all according to him. And he confessed to the crime. This is a fact. His first confession was not a confession. It's on video, and I've watched it. And basically, it's a cop saying, his first confession, all the facts were wrong. That's not on video. The one that's on video he never says anything in his own words. It's just yeah or no. It's the cop reading, okay, and so then this happened, yes. So there never was a confession per se in his own words. It was something that he stipulated to.
And this is a common theme in criminal justice, that prosecutors will come in, the police will come in and say, if you want to go home, just say this. Just plead guilty to this, and I'll get you home. And a lot of times it's a lie, and a lot of times it's manipulation. And this kid who was in special ed classes, blind in one eye, probably didn't have the best self-esteem, probably wasn't the smartest kid in the world, fell for it. His mother or grandmother, I think it was, gave the police alleged permission to do this alone without a lawyer. Without having a parent or grandparent present, which was a huge mistake. And the reason I'm going over some of these facts is for the people who are listening, I think it's helpful, George, to tell these stories for people in the situation, for potential jurors, for everybody involved to know that this stuff is really happening, and it's happening in Detroit, and it's happened in the last 15 years, and we're hoping it's not happening anymore, but who the hell knows? But with Devontae Sanford, he confessed to a quadruple homicide that he did not commit. True?
Well, prosecutors have not come out and said that he's innocent yet. But so they still won't go there. They haven't said that. So it's kind of a strange situation, Mike, because you have people where the prosecutors and everybody stipulated they've dropped the case. They let him out of prison. Yeah. Right.
And they said, so why do they let him out of prison if they think he did it?
Because they say the case was tainted because the deputy chief, or the commander who later was deputy chief, James Talbert, committed perjury. So they say, I think it was Ed White from the AP. It wasn't my question, or maybe I think it was Eddie. And he asked point blank, so are you saying Devontae's innocent? At the press conference of Kim Worthy announcing that she was dropping charges, she would not say that. She wouldn't. So
to this day, she hasn't admitted it.
She's still not said that he's innocent, but she said that she couldn't continue to keep him in prison because the case was tainted because of.
What is she worried about? Why can't she come out and say, yeah, we made a mistake? He's already gotten estate money.
Yeah, I can't I won't. I don't like to speculate.
No,
sure, yeah.
But
rhetorical
what's
question,
a guess?
Sure.
I can't even. She has come out on other cases and said we made a mistake.
Sure. Maybe it's as simple as she honestly doesn't think there was a mistake. I don't know. I do know that. In my entire career, I've never seen a public official go from being not well liked in a community to getting lauded. Since she wasn't. I don't think I'm telling any state secrets here to say she wasn't the most popular person in the innocence community for years and years and years, right? But since she did that conviction integrity, she's gotten a lot of praise from people because of that. And Val Newman is well known in that community as being, champion for these wrongful convicted people. And I think it was I guess I can editorialize and say it was a good hire.
And we've praised her on this show for doing the right thing in certain. Val is for doing certain. Letting certain people out. Do you know the count, how many people they've let out at this point?
I just asked her, a couple of weeks. I think it was 15, something like that.
They're at 15.
Yeah, I believe.
Which is amazing. Yeah. But in this case, there are so many twists and turns, and I highly recommend you dive into Devontae Sanford's case, and we'll attach some links to George's materials on it. But 2 weeks after Devontae is found guilty, or is it 2 weeks after he was sentenced?
After he went to prison.
Okay. 2 weeks after Devontae Sanford went to prison, another man by the name of...
Vincent Smothers.
Vincent Smothers is a professional hitman who got caught and gave detailed accounts of 12 murders that he did to save his girlfriend who just gave birth to his son days before. Am I saying it semi-right?
Yeah. There's a little girl, but
a little girl.
Other facts
okay.
other than that are
right.
accurate. Yes.
And the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office charged Mr. Smothers with 8 of the 12 homicides and left off the 4 that Devontae was sitting in prison for his entire life for.
Right. They didn't charge him with those, despite the fact that he gave, in contrast to Devontae's confession, which wasn't one, Smothers gave incredibly accurate details, including the kind of guns used. The shell casings matched that. The shell casings there at the Runyon scene matched the casings for other hits for which they prosecuted him. Okay, and then here's the kicker. He said, you know what? My partner stashed the gun at this house on Promenade Street. It's in his mom's closet up there. They went to the house on Promenade Street. There was the gun. Ballistics matched. That's an open and shutter if I've ever heard one, but they have not charged him to this day.
It makes no sense. Dave Moran did a really nice job of laying out the differences between the testimony, why Smothers was obviously the person who did it. They found the weapon. He had accurate information about the crime scene where Devontae had no information about the crime scene. It's one. I see why you picked this one out of the dozens and dozens of cases you've covered, that this one has so many twists and turns. Has Smothers ever been charged with these 4 crimes?
No, and neither. When Michigan State Police in 2015, Kim Worthy convened them to do another look at this case. And at the end of that investigation, they submitted 3 warrants. One was for perjury for James Talbert. The other 2 were murder warrants for Vincent Smothers and his alleged accomplice, which was a guy named Ernest Davis, Nemo. Vito and Nemo, they were their street names. So Vito was Vincent Smothers and Nemo was Ernest. Well, they never charged Ernest even after state police asked for it. So them never charging him, he went out and shot somebody else. And he was convicted for that. He was recently released from prison on that one. So I mean, I tried to get a hold of the parents of his other shooting victim, and I don't have to say alleged because he was convicted of that one. So they didn't charge him. He went out and shot someone else, And despite, I think there's still open murder warrants for Vincent Smothers. They kicked it back for more work to the Michigan State Police. I don't know specifically what more work they wanted, but I think the warrant is still open. They still want to charge. State police detectives did an investigation and concluded that Vincent Smothers and Ernest Davis were guilty, and they submitted warrant requests.
And James Tolbert is no longer in the law enforcement business, is he?
Not that I know of. Most recently, he went to Highland Park, and there were protests out there from folks, and I think he resigned, and I've not been able to. In fact, I reached out to him. I reached out to him for the podcast. I wanted, if he wanted to give his side, I would have been more than happy to. Mm-hmm. And same as Mike Russell. I had a conversation with him. I've had a couple conversations with him. I said, anytime you want to give your side, I don't have a dog in it. If you think that you're wrongfully, I'm happy to put your side. I will attack the story if you have proof, as vehemently as I did the other one. I don't care. I just want a good story, And if it turns out that you're being wrongfully said, that you wrongfully convicted somebody, tell me what you have to say,
And he won't come on.
Well, no, I mean, nor will Tolbert. So,
yeah, it's so maddening. Allegedly, what these guys did to a 14-year-old boy. And how many years did he spend in prison?
More than 9, like almost 9.
I mean, if you listen to the stories and read George's stuff, it's impossible. What evidence did they have he committed these crimes other than a bullshit confession? Other than that, was there any physical evidence?
There was blood on a shoe, supposedly, but it didn't match. And then that later on, they said it matched, but it was really a strange. I got some phone calls for people advocating for the officers in this thing, saying, "Look, man, there's new information." And I went and dug into it. I did a story. It was like, well, that's not exactly what you're saying. So there was blood on a shoe, supposedly, but it didn't ever turn. Here's what's interesting is when Kim Worthy announced. When she announced she was dropping the charges, she had a 2-hour press conference, and I highlighted that in the podcast. And one of the things they did, it was interesting to see that they were trying to basically show everybody, look, we had evidence. We didn't just throw this kid in jail. It was basically, hey, So they're showing all the evidence they had. One of the things, I didn't put this in the podcast, but one of the things they did was they had actually animated sort of a graphic to show that the footprints, the dog track, and it goes to the house. And at the press conference, I said, excuse me, that's not true. I mean, I know this case like the back of my hand, right? They didn't go to his house. They went 350 feet down the street from his house. And I said at the time, I said, you're talking about the difference between home plate and left field home run at Comerica Park. To say that they went right to the dog track, right to his house when the murder happened down the street, I think that's a bit disingenuous. It didn't go to his house. That dog tracked 350 feet away from that house. And again, if you want to put that in perspective, that's home plate to left field. That's a home run at Comerica Park. I wouldn't say that it walked right up to your house.
Right.
You know, that's not true. So, they put out this, and this was something that it wasn't a mistake. They put this out. They did a graphic, why they did that. I mean, I guess you'd have to ask them. I don't know. But, there were a lot of things said at that presser that were questionable.
They spent a lot of energy to trying to convict a kid who had no physical connection to this crime, and he didn't. And one of the common themes in all of these wrongful convictions, talking to these exonerees, reading through these trials, is lousy court-appointed counsel.
Sure.
These people can't afford good lawyers. They're getting handed lawyers through the state, through the county, I should say, not the state, and. Do you remember the lawyer name?
I do, and in fact, that's one of the misunderstood. This was not a court appointed. They retained him. It was Robert Slamica,
right?
Who has since been disbarred.
They all get disbarred. Go ahead. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
After multiple ethics violations, he was running his office out of the casino.
You're kidding me.
No, whoever the attorney discipline board, they wrote up a thing and said it looked like something out of Better Call Saul.
Love it. Yeah. So I don't love it actually, but it's funny, kinda. Not for Devontae.
I know, yes,
so they rustled up some money, paid this guy.
Yeah.
He was not a court-appointed attorney, but he was obviously a lousy attorney. I think somebody said it was the worst attorney ever. And is he still alive?
I believe so. He's not practicing, obviously. I tried to reach out to him multiple times, through the years as he's been accused of this, that, and the other thing, and he's never given me an interview. And
the only thing that he cared about was a plea.
Well, that's what according to the mom, he was pressuring, and according to Davontae, they kept pressuring, you got to plead guilty. And Nolan Finley, one of our columnists, has done work on this. He talked a great deal about how in Wayne County they do that a lot. I mean, plea deals are what they do. And if you're an attorney, and Bob Slamica does get a lot of appointments. And if you can make as Nolan said in his column, make the trains run on time, get these guys to plead guilty, you'll keep getting appointments because you're allowing the system to keep going through. Well, we're not moving cattle here. These are people and it's their lives. But the pressure is on to plead guilty. They just don't have. They say they don't have enough people to adjudicate every one of these cases. So Slamica, according to the family, was hot and heavy on. And what he told them is, look. There's no way you're a black kid. You're going to get an all-white jury. There's no way they're not going to convict you, and you're going to spend the rest of your life in prison. You're only 14, and I'm cool with this judge. This is what Devontae told me that his lawyer told him is, I'm tight with this judge. We're real good friends. You're only going to get maybe 10 years. You're 14, you'll be 24. You won't even be 30 when you get out, or you're facing life, and you will get convicted. Well, you get an unsophisticated kid and
a mom who's not sophisticated.
Yeah, at the time, she's open about it. She had a drug problem at the time. She's very open. She talks about it. She doesn't hide. She says she was dealing with it. And in fact, she says this is what slapped her in the face, and she says she needed to get her stuff together. I mean, she had a tough life herself. I mean, she got burned really badly. There's all kinds of. She's had a tough way to go as well. And she got hooked on drugs. When her kid went to prison, I think she says that focused her to get off the drugs, and her focus then became to get her kid out of prison. And then she did. She was. She was
an advocate.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah.
Well, you have to bring these cases to people's attention so people can get angry. And that's what happened, right? I mean, they got the attention of the University of Michigan Innocence Clinic. Yeah. And that's not necessarily an easy thing to do.
The first ones, I think, was the Sato picked this up. Was the
Sato
first?
Did?
Yeah, they were the first one, and then it got.
They brought in the Innocence Clinic.
Yeah, the Sato, I think, was because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, what happened there is one of the attorneys. And it was a woman, forgive me, I can't remember her name, and I should, but she got a tip from one of the cops who was a good cop. That's one thing I always say about police corruption, things like that. I'll tell you who tells me about the police corruption. It's the good cops. I mean, they hate, they don't like it. I get tips all the time from the good cops.
What was the tip in this case? Because I remember your podcast.
That Vincent Smothers had, hey, someone else confessed to this and they're not charging him. That was, and then she held a press conference. If memory serves, you're going back 15 years or so. This is 2008-ish. But yeah, she had a presser, and that I think she got the tip because they wanted to bury that. That's the thing, is when he confessed, they were like, okay, let's don't. That's why, according to everybody I've talked to about him, most of the advocates, the innocence advocates, the theory is they didn't want him, Vincent Smothers, to stand trial. They didn't want anyone knowing he had confessed to these 4 killings, because then the question is, here's what I don't understand. There were clearly 2 people there, right? They're 2 different shell casings. So why, the part I don't understand about this is let's unpack the theory that they didn't want to be embarrassed for having wrongfully convicted a kid. There were 2 people there. So why couldn't they say, hey, okay, Vincent Smothers, you did it too, but we believe Devontae did it. Maybe that didn't run with the confession they had convicted him on. I don't know.
Now, Kim Worthy was the prosecutor when this happened, when he pled guilty?
Yes, she was the prosecutor.
Because she's been in since when?
03-ish,
Okay, so she'd already been there 5 years. Because, that's one of the most troubling things about this Davontae Sanford case. 2 weeks after he's sent to prison, they found the real killer. And it took 9 years to get him out. So
with overwhelming evidence.
Evidence. Yeah. So I don't know Kim Worthy. I'm not even going to speculate anything about her right this second in this story. But imagine you have she denied it in her press conference, but you have a person admitting to the crime, the 4 murders, giving them detailed information about the guns. They were accurate information. Devontae did not have the accurate information. He gave the wrong makes and models of the guns. Mr. Smothers had the right information, plus lots of details. So this person's only 2 weeks in prison. Like, you could have gotten him out that day and saved him 9 years, and you would have had some egg on your face. Yeah. And instead, they buried the 4 confessions. They charged him with 8 other crimes. If a good cop would not have sent it to people like you, this would have stayed buried. True?
My next question then, and I'm sure it's yours, is how many people are sitting in prison? I mean, can you imagine? And here's something interesting. Gabi Silver, who was Vincent Smothers' attorney, told me that Vincent told her, this is the worst place. You can't even imagine how bad it is in prison. She said, and he told her, and I did it. I admit that I killed people. I belong here. He says, I can't even fathom how terrible this place must be when you didn't do it.
So, have you ever talked to Vincent Smothers?
No, I tried a couple times.
That'd be an interesting interview.
Believe me, I tried. I was trying to see if I talked to him somewhere in there, but no, not him.
Because according to your podcast, you got the sense that he felt bad for Devontae.
Yeah, Vincent's a really interesting character. I would love to interview him. In fact, he supposedly was a hitman with a conscience, but he killed Rose Cobb. That was the one time supposedly that he went outside of only killing dope dealers. He killed the
who's Rose Cobb?
Rose Cobb was the wife of Sergeant David Cobb, a Detroit police officer. One of the many coincidences. And if I could do a quick side thing, we only had 2 podcasts. If you want a deep dive into all the crazy stuff, I did something right when Devontae got out of prison. And in fact, if I could sidetrack a little bit here, I had gotten a tip. The MSPs was about to, I got a lot of sources. I got a tip from one of my sources. MSP is about to drop this report, and they're going to say that Devontae didn't do it, and that Vincent Smothers and Ernest Davis are the ones, then a few days later, I got a tip that Tolbert was about to be charged with perjury. So I told my boss, but this wasn't going to get dropped for another month. I had a month advance. So I told my boss, I said, look, I got a tip here, okay? Give me a couple weeks off. Let me put together a comprehensive website, because there's so many coincidences and threads and webs in this thing. And they did, to their credit. And we had it cocked and loaded. We didn't know he was going to get out of prison, so they let him out of prison. So we had this nice. So it's called the Devontae Sanford's Road to Freedom. If you look that up, you'll be able to find it. But it's just so many cops around this thing. It's like, this is interesting. I'll give you a quick one. So Rose Cobb was the wife of Sergeant David Cobb. David Cobb was seeing a woman named Sheila Black. He was having an affair with her, right? So they decided that they wanted to kill the wife and collect her insurance money, or her 401k, that sort of thing. So on the day after Christmas, I believe it was 2007, Vincent Smothers, he admitted this. There's a CVS on Jefferson there, a little bit east of downtown, and went in there, and the husband went in the store. The wife said, "It's all planned." He walked up to her and killed her. So there's so many coincidences here. So Sheila, Vincent's accomplice in that case was a kid named Marzell Black, 18-year-old kid, Sheila Black's son. Apparently, Sheila Black and the cop, David Cobb, asked her son, "Hey, you know anybody that'll kill somebody?" And Marzell said, "Yeah, there's this guy I played basketball with, Vincent Smothers." So he hooked it up. He went and helped him, and he got convicted of doing this. They were poor. The Black family was poor. They had a house on the east side. The porch was not on. It didn't have steps. It was ripped off, so you had to go along the side. It was run down. These people were poor. I'm trying to stress this. Do you know who represented? I probably shouldn't go there. Let me just put it this way. A couple really, really high-powered attorneys represented Marzell Black.
If it's all public record, who the hell?
Okay, Todd Flood and Gerald Evelyn.
Okay.
And I was like, really? How did he afford? Why?
So what's your theory?
I don't know. I don't. It's interesting.
So high-powered, good defense attorneys represented Marzell
at the initial, yeah. And then it's just weird. It was a strange. I saw them. I was like, that's weird. There's Devontae being at the house of the head of homicide at the time that a homicide happens. There's cops all through this thing. It's like, that's interesting. Does that mean anything? I don't know. Not only the homicide cop, but a dirty homicide cop who ended up getting convicted. I mean, there's a lot of coincidences here, just a ton of them.
It's maddening. We interviewed John Shea last week, who's on the Michigan Indigent Defense Commission, who they're setting up training for everybody who's going to take appointments in 12 to 16 hours. I talked to Shantae Parker last week, who's running the new Wayne County Defender's Office. And they're all hopeful that these type of situations are going to go away with better training, better defense attorneys, more oversight. What are your thoughts? Do you think that these types of railroading are still happening, or you think that things are getting better?
Well, I think things are getting better, but I also think they're still happening. You got human beings involved, so anytime you're going to have an imperfect system. You can put things in place, and I believe they have been. I asked Chief Craig in great detail about this, and one of the things I can say, I think objectively, is there was not much accountability. I started on the beat in '98. That was the Wild West days, and that it later came. All the problems that necessitated the consent judgments. This happened to a buddy of mine. I lived in Southwest Detroit at the time, and a buddy of mine. This speaks to the wrongful convictions, because one of the first episode I did of that podcast was about shaky witnesses. Witnesses had put so many people in prison wrongfully. So my buddy, and they were hanging out in Southwest Detroit, and their friend, his name was Fidel. He looked like Fidel Castro, Mexican cat. So they're all hanging out, a couple buddies of mine, and there's a knock on Fidel's door. They're in his garage. And my friend John, he was about to go out in the alley to relieve himself, frankly. And he was there. He said, "You want me to open the door?" He'd just come back, and he said, "You want me to open it?" And Fidel said no. So Fidel opens the door, and they light him up, blew him, the blood everywhere. So my friend and my other friend Arturo, they're completely traumatized by this, right? They just witnessed a murder. The guys had on ski masks, and they died behind a couch, right? And so they called the police. The police come. The police arrested them and held them. This is what they did. They would arrest witnesses and hold them for like days, weeks. And these guys were held almost 2 days. They didn't do anything wrong. The cops weren't saying they did anything wrong. What they were trying to get them to do, according to my friend, and I believe him, why would he lie to me? He told me this when it happened. They were trying to get him to pin the murder on a guy they wanted to pin it on. And they kept saying, it's him, isn't it? It's him, isn't it? And they're like, no, the guys had ski masks. We don't know who they were, So, and this has happened to friends of mine. So, that was what DPD was like back in those days. You know, there was a lot. Now, again, we're not throwing everybody under the bus, but it's certainly that was the culture there. There was a culture where that was allowed.
We keep hearing stories like this in every one of these wrongful conviction cases. There's some police officers, detectives who want this conviction and they want it pinned, like in Kenny's case when they put Kenny Winenko's case when they put the McCormick in a room with the police report and said, we're going to shave a lot of years off your sentence. Read the report and you're going to help us. I mean,
you got to wonder how people sleep at night. You know, I mean, nobody's perfect, and we all, you know, cut corners here and there, and we do things maybe that we're not 100% proud of, you know, and that sort of thing. But you got to wonder, you know, especially, okay, here's how a lot of the cops justify this. Well, he's a piece of crap. If he didn't do this, you know, you'll get a guy with a long, lengthy record in many cases. And well, if he didn't do this, then
he did something else.
Yeah, so we don't have that much cognitive dissonance about it. Okay, that's bad as it can be by itself, but it just, you got to wonder when you get a guy that's completely innocent,
right,
is not a bad actor like Kenny. Kenny, not to say the other guys are bad actors, but some of them were selling dope.
Kenny, Davontae, Aaron Salter.
Yeah. Yeah,
they just got out of college.
Aaron was a football player.
I know.
He's not out causing problems. Yeah, I mean, some of these guys were dope dealers and whatnot. Oh, it's the other guy, Kendrick. They weren't doing anything. One of the big ones that spent 34 years is Daryl Siggers. He said, you know, he smoked a little weed, but I mean, he had no record.
That's a horrible case too.
I mean, that guy, and he's one of the most, what's the word I'm looking for? He's just a powerful guy. His voice is powerful. His emotion, he conveys perfectly, you know, what that's like. And then, you know, it blows my mind, and it's an honor to know these guys.
I agree.
It really is. You got guys that went through that, and they're still standing tall. You know, they're still standing with their head held high. You know, I tip my cap to them.
Yeah.
You know?
No. Listen, I do too, and that's why I am committed to doing lots and lots of podcasts about them, about their stories. Everybody needs to hear these stories. Yeah. Everybody needs to meet Kenny. I had him here talking to a group of my lawyers 2 weeks ago. And he's an inspiration. Yeah, these guys are great, and watching them get second chances, like Aaron Salter just had a baby, Ava, and just hearing the joy in his voice. And I talked to a gentleman in prison doing life that we are considering helping, which I'll talk to you off the record about. Okay. You know, he has hope to get out because says he didn't do what he did. The evidence looks that way, and he wants to have more children. And you know, I want to help. You know, just find the truth, find justice, get them new trials if the trials had bad attorneys and bad evidence, and because I'm seeing murder cases 2, 3, 4 days. I mean, an auto case takes that long. Yeah. How is a murder case going to with a? And you read these transcripts, and you know, a 10-year-old could have done a better job at cross-examination. I'm sure you see that all the time.
Sometimes it's really bad. You wonder. It's like, hello, I want to judge you. I'm sitting in there. It's like, hello, you're not asking any questions.
It's mind blowing. I have so many more things I want to talk to you about, but we could go through every one of these cases, and maybe we should eventually, you know, dive deep into the cases like we just did with Davontae Sanford, and we just scratched the surface with him.
Yeah, we didn't even get into the details.
That case is mind-blowing and upsetting and sad. But before I let you go today, I want to talk about facial recognition, because you've been writing lots of articles about that, and about the police using it, and they're arresting the wrong people. You know, is this here to stay, or what's going to happen with facial recognition?
Well, where it stands now in Detroit is the contract was up for renewal a couple days ago, actually, and they took that off the table. They want more discussion. I think they're going to try to. I don't know whether it's going to get passed in this environment. It got unanimously passed, I believe, the first time when they bought it.
To use it
on city council. And they had a hearing, and there were questions asked about the privacy issues and, you know, the obvious issues that someone might ask, and it got approved. But now I think they're trying. They pulled it up. It was going to come up for a vote earlier this week or last week. And where it stands now is they took the vote off, and they're just going to have more discussion. But I think what they want is they're trying to garner public support for it. have more hearings at meetings, et cetera, et cetera. But we'll see. That's where it stands.
Okay.
But it's, obviously.
Do you think it's a useful tool, or do you think it's?
Well, I think I don't know if we were on the air when we discussed this earlier or not, but I think it's the same as the analogy that is a gun a useful tool if it's used properly? Is a gun a useful law enforcement tool? If it's used properly, yes, it is. And I guess one of the questions I asked some of the officials is there a point, let's say they do renew this and it continues to be an issue, and you say that it's useful as a law enforcement tool. Is there a point, though, where you're expending so much energy defending it? You only have finite resources. Is there a point where it's no longer, the yin overtakes the yang, and it's no longer, it's more of a pain in the butt than it is useful? But yeah, it's a very useful tool when used properly. Real quick, here's one of the things. I don't know if I've ever covered an issue in my entire career that gets more misunderstood than this one. The question, we're not talking about the privacy issue. Let's take that off the table. That's by itself, and that's a whole different thing.
Sure.
The issue of whether or not it flags people of color more, it's bone structure, first of all. It's not skin tone. So there's that. That's the first. My analogy would be if I were to take a car in the auto factory, and I take it off the line at the first step. Okay, you only have the frame. I get behind the wheel and I say, this thing doesn't run. Let's scrap this whole car project. It doesn't work. That's the analogy I use. Yes, at the front end of it, it does flag black people, Hispanic, more often. There's more steps in the program, in the process, to make sure that you don't just say, hey, look, it flagged that guy, go arrest him. That's not how it works. There's like 10 more steps that have to get taken to mitigate if that happens, So, I mean, it's just, I don't know if people don't want, they will painstakingly explain that, and then someone's next question will be something that shows they clearly didn't listen to what they just said.
Right.
It's like, so I don't know if they don't want to hear it. And again, there's privacy issues. I'm not taking a stand on whether it's good, bad, or other. I'm just saying that there's a lot of misinformation that goes out about this, and the privacy issue, you can get into that. People are talking about abolishing green light. What's interesting is that some of the same public officials who are now saying that they should abolish green light were very recently advocating for green light because their constituents wanted it. So
I don't see the problem. Explain to me what are the problems with green light? So I toured green light at headquarters a couple years ago already now, and I saw the operations room.
You're talking about the real-time crime center.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I didn't know the technical name.
Sorry,
of it.
I don't mean to sound like a know-it-all.
No.
Yeah.
But they were very proud of it, and they wanted to show it to me, and I was there for a meeting, and I thought, basically what I saw were cameras on establishments that wanted cameras, extra lighting. They had this green light to show that this is kind of a safe zone, and they thought it would promote business and promote safety. They also showed how they had real live eyeballs watching it at all times, that if a crime happened, they have it on tape. They could send police right to the scene and say, oh, it was a red car, blah, 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 these plates. So I didn't see privacy issues when I was there. But,
well, I mean, you see the green light, you can choose not to go in there. I guess some people could say that, hey, I don't have a car or something, I'm poor, I live in this area, and my only choices, and I don't want to be, my only choice is to go to this nearest green light, grocery store, say. I mean, I'm theorizing. What the biggest criticism I've heard of it, and I did a story about this, is some merchants say, wait a minute, I'm already paying taxes. You know what I mean? For police protection. These guys pay extra money, they get extra protection. That was the thing. Okay. I talked to the police about that, and they explained that no, it's not extra protection. And it's neighborhood police officers who will go in there and sign a logbook. But that's they're not police. It's a neighborhood police officer situation. So it's not really. And then one of the merchants who complained about something and told me something happened, DPD showed me the record, and that's not exactly how it went down. So I did a follow-up story to correct the record. Again, if 100 years from now somebody reads it, then.
But right. I know that they had to pay for the cameras, and they have to pay some more electricity, and they have to pay to have the right computer hookups and Wi-Fi or whatever it is. Right. So there's some extra cost to the merchants.
Sure.
But is it the merchants complaining, or are people complaining?
I mean, it's a small first of all, complaints are small. It's a pretty popular program
Okay.
from what I could see, but there's a vocal people who are complaining about it. But I mean, I think it's the privacy thing. I think it's the idea that you got cameras. Again, you're talking about the same with the federal troops that we talked about earlier. The notion that people are filming you is scary. I get it. Yeah, I'm a privacy guy too. I don't want to be, I don't want an eye everywhere I go. I don't want people knowing what stores I visit or that sort of thing. But, so I get it. I get the privacy concerns, but, I mean, they're not harvesting data. They're not keeping this stuff. I don't, that's the big thing is they're not, with the facial recognition, they're not harvesting this stuff and keeping you on record or something.
So I just got a text message asking this question. Does the Project Greenlight use facial recognition? Are those cameras facial recognition
no,
enabled?
That was a misunderstanding. They use cameras from Project Greenlight. Let's say so it's not they're just there's no facial recognition in the cameras. It's software that's
just
in
cameras.
Yeah, it's cameras. So if you walk into a Greenlight location and rob somebody, boom, your image will be used from that, but it's not. They're not intertwined that way where the cameras in the stores have facial recognition on them. And again, one of the other things that gets again from a privacy concern standpoint, yeah, I have an issue if I'm walking around and I go in even a green light and they're facial recognizing me and using that and running me through the system. That's not what they're doing. What they're doing is if there's a violent crime, again, one of the misunderstood elements of this is if there's a crime at that location, they will go over the tape. Oh, and when they see the actual crime being committed, they're not gonna run the faces of everybody who walked in there they might maybe if there's a few people that look like they might have been an accomplice, but it's not a matter of let's just run everyone who walked in there. It's that's where the crime happened. Let's take his picture. Now we'll run it through the software and see if there's any matches in the so again, I understand the privacy concerns, but I don't think they apply here. I just don't.
Okay. Well, because you mentioned that people are trying to get them to disband it, and that seems strange. But let's leave it at that for now. I know we have lots more to talk about, so I'm going to have you come back, George, if you would. Maybe we can do it in person. We could do Zoom if you're busy. But I learned a lot today. I appreciate you bringing up everything you did. I appreciate, your reporting. Anybody who doesn't know can follow George Hunter at the Detroit News. Check out Sins of Detroit. You have a couple books. Tell me about your books.
Oh, golly. I wrote one on the Tara Grant case. That was in 2007 where Stephen Grant dismembered his wife and threw her body parts in the park. Kind of a gruesome case. And I did one on the Bob Bashara case, Master Bob with the sex dungeon and all. My wife and I, Lynn Rosenthal, wrote that one. And in my most recent one, actually the first one I wrote with an editor of mine who loved true crime and wanted to be a true crime. So I said, let's do one together, And now this one was one I wrote by myself. It's about the Tigers, which is, I said, I'm a big baseball fan, and it's about, and I'm a crime guy, so Tigers and crime and mayhem, and it's called, oh Lord, what's this? Crime and Mayhem and Detroit Tigers Gone Wild.
So people could find those on Amazon?
Yeah, on Amazon.
Well, congratulations.
Bookstores near you.
Are there any bookstores left?
I think, I had a book signing at one. Was it not B. Dalton? What is it? I can't think of it. Yeah, there is a few.
There's a few left?
John King's still down there, too.
John King.
Yeah.
Are you selling your books down there?
Well, I hope not yet,
Right, those are used.
Yeah, right.
That would be, that wouldn't be great.
Buy 5 copies for your mother.
I'm buying. Listen, I got my Christmas presents all picked out this year. That's amazing. And again, Sins of Detroit, I love that you told me before we went on the air that the great music George wrote and produced for the Sins of Detroit. He did the whole thing in a couple weeks, which I thought was awesome. And I hope you do. I hope I get to hear season 2 coming up whenever you have time and whenever you have the stories to do it. But it sure sounds like you're not going to have a lack of stories here in Detroit.
No, content's never a problem when you're covering crime in Detroit.
Let's leave it at that. Thanks, George.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching another episode of Open Mic. Today we had George Hunter on, the longtime columnist for the Detroit News, the crime beat. He's been covering everything under the sun for the last 20 plus years. We got into Davontae Sanford's case and the Detroit police, Project Greenlight, lots of good stuff. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it on your social media channels. Somewhere around my head, you're going to see a subscribe button. Subscribe, share, like, comment. Send me a text message, email on stories that you'd like to hear in the future, and we'll keep bringing open mic to you. So please keep listening. Thank you.